Welcome to Screw Crime. This isn't your typical true crime channel. We're not here to glorify killers. We're here to expose what the headlines missed. No soft voices, no sugarcoating, just the raw, unfiltered truth. Tonight we dig into the story of a man who looked like any other suburban dad. A man with a wife, kids, and a grocery store empire. But behind the walls of his Indiana estate, something monstrous was growing. And in his pool house, mannequins watched, while young men never came back. This is the story of Herb Baumeister. He didn't just hide in plain sight. He built his reputation on it. And by the time anyone looked too closely, it was already too late. This is Screw Crime. Let's get into it. The man at the store. The Save-A-Lot grocery store in Westfield, Indiana, didn't look like much from the outside. It was one of those places you passed a dozen times without noticing, its boxy frame camouflaged by strip malls and empty parking lots. But for Herb Baumeister, the store was everything. It was his fresh start, his stab at normalcy, his mask. Customers saw a peculiar man, tall, thin, always impeccably dressed, though slightly off. He spoke in staccato bursts, polite but distant, with a strange intensity in his eyes. He wasn't just the owner, he was the face. He greeted regulars by name, micromanaged employees, and obsessively checked receipts and stock levels. Herb didn't trust easily, not even his wife Julie, and certainly not the teenage cashiers who, unbeknownst to him, gossiped about how he talked to mannequins when he thought no one was watching. Behind the store's success was a man slowly fraying at the edges. Herb's wife noticed first. The sleeping arrangements had become separate years ago, a quiet arrangement neither of them acknowledged. There were whispers of drinking, bottles hidden in the garage, erratic behavior, rage fits over misplaced keys or soggy bread. Their marriage was a polite truce, preserved only for the children and the image it projected. But behind closed doors, the man she had married had become a stranger. Julie chalked it up to stress. Owning a business was hard. Raising children, harder. And Herb had always been eccentric. That was the word she used with her friends. Eccentric. But there were signs no amount of euphemism could explain. The mannequins in the pool house were the first real clue. Herb said they were for decoration, to make the indoor pool feel lived in. Julie nodded, laughed nervously, and moved on. But she never liked being out there alone. Neither did the kids. Fox Hollow Farm was supposed to be their dream home. Sprawling acres of wooded land, a massive house with marble floors, and that bizarre pool house that always smelled of chlorine and something metallic. The kids would invite friends over, but most only came once. There was something about the place, something they couldn't articulate. Like the air was too still, like the laughter never echoed properly. One night, in the fall of 1994, Julie woke to find Herb pacing the hallway. He didn't see her at first. He was whispering, arguing with someone who wasn't there. When she asked him what was wrong, he blinked like coming out of a trance. "Just thinking," he said. "Business stuff." Julie went back to bed, but didn't sleep. What no one knew, what no one wanted to believe, was that Herb Baumeister was already spiraling into darkness. The disappearances of young men from Indianapolis's gay bar scene had begun years earlier, quietly, without notice. The police weren't connecting the dots. Most of the victims were drifters or estranged from family, runaways, addicts, kids with no one looking too closely. Herb knew this. He counted on it. He would drive into the city in the evenings, alone, slipping into bars like the 501 Club or the Varsity. He knew how to smile just enough. He knew how to blend, how to listen without being noticed. And when he found someone he liked, someone desperate or lonely enough to follow him home, he would invite them to Fox Hollow. They never came back, but no one had caught on yet. Not the police, not Julie, not the teenage employees, not even the mannequins who stood silently in the pool house, bearing witness to something they could never tell. Not yet. The disappearances begin. The first disappearance went unnoticed. He was young, maybe 20, a runaway perhaps, someone no one thought to miss right away. Then there was another, and another. Over the span of several years, young men began vanishing from the Indianapolis gay scene. Most were last seen leaving clubs or bars late at night. Some were said to be with a clean-cut older man. But there were no names, no license plates, just rumors and cold trails. The police at first dismissed the cases. They assumed these men had simply left town, turned to drugs, or were hiding from families. In the early 1990s, missing gay men didn't get front-page coverage. Their names were whispered in community centers or scribbled onto corkboards beneath the word missing. But the disappearances continued. A few people in the LQB+ community started connecting dots. Bartenders swapped stories about a man who used different names, who was polite but stiff, who offered rides and asked strange questions. Some believed he was a cop. Others thought he was just lonely. That man was Herb Baumeister. While Herb played the part of the suburban father and business owner by day, he lived a double life by night. He cruised the bars and parks, posing as someone named Brian Smart. He told stories of working in landscaping or interior design. His demeanor was always just awkward enough to be disarming. Victims often trusted him not because he was charming, but because he seemed harmless. One of the few survivors, known in reports as Tony Harris, met Brian Smart in 1994. They struck up a conversation at the Varsity Lounge. Brian was curious, attentive, and invited Tony to come see his home. Tony agreed, and they drove north out of the city, eventually arriving at a sprawling estate. The house was large and dark, except for an eerie blue glow coming from the pool house. Inside were mannequins, dozens of them, positioned as if they were at a cocktail party. Brian said it helped him feel less alone. Then the tone changed. Brian wanted to play a game. Erotic asphyxiation, he said. Just for fun. He demonstrated on himself and then asked Tony to try. Tony, alarmed, played along just long enough to escape. He reported the encounter to police. But with only a fake name and a vague description, the case stalled. Tony wasn't the only one. Others came forward, telling similar stories of a man who liked to choke during sex, who invited them to a pool house filled with mannequins. Still, the police didn't act. Meanwhile, at Fox Hollow Farm, the tension grew. Julie began noticing strange things. Wet clothing in Herb's car that wasn't his, the smell of chemicals in the pool house, and the way Herb would disappear for long hours without explanation. Their relationship had eroded. They barely spoke. Herb's moods were unpredictable. He was erratic, defensive, and increasingly paranoid. He accused her of spying, of conspiring. Sometimes he slept in the pool house instead of their bedroom. Julie began to suspect something darker. But without proof, she said nothing. Until the day she found something buried in the woods. She had taken their son Eric hiking behind the property when he pointed at something poking out of the soil. A bone. Small, weathered. She snapped a photo, brushed it off as animal remains, and tucked the image away. But in the back of her mind, a storm was brewing. Herb was unraveling, and so was the life they had built together. The store, the home, the family dinners. It was all a performance now, a mask for something sinister. And somewhere, Beneath the leaves and soil of Fox Hollow Farm, the truth was beginning to rot its way to the surface. Surveillance and suspicion. By early 1995, Virgil Vandegrift, a retired Marion County sheriff turned private investigator, had begun compiling a list. The names on that list shared a chilling similarity: young gay men who had vanished without a trace after last being seen at local bars. Most families had reported their loved ones missing. Most were dismissed or stalled by police. But Virgil saw a pattern. He'd been hired by the mother of a missing man named Roger Goodlett. Roger had vanished after being seen at the Varsity Lounge. Vandegrift canvassed the area, asking questions, following dead leads until he found someone who had escaped. The survivor, known publicly only as Tony Harris, told a harrowing story of a man who called himself Brian Smart, who invited him to a mansion with a pool house, mannequins, and an interest in breath play. Tony described the drive, the house, and the strangulation game he narrowly escaped. He remembered the car, the driveway, the eeriness of the mannequins, silent and frozen, like an audience. Virgil alerted the authorities. Detective Mary Wilson of the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department listened. She took Tony seriously. When they finally cross-referenced Tony's description with DMV records and partial plates, only one man matched: Herb Baumeister. Julie, meanwhile, continued to see signs. The bone in the woods haunted her. Herb was drinking more heavily. He was becoming aggressive, screaming at her in front of the children, locking doors, hoarding trash in black bags she wasn't allowed to touch. The mannequins were now more than decor. They had become arranged in groups, like social scenes, sitting poolside, playing cards, posed in frozen laughter. One night, she followed Herb as he loaded bags into his trunk. She stayed back, heart pounding, as he drove off into the night. She didn't know where he went. She didn't want to know. But when she looked inside the pool house afterward, she found handcuffs, ropes, and the stench of bleach. Detective Wilson visited Julie under the pretense of routine questioning. When she cautiously asked about Herb's late-night drives, Julie hesitated. Then, for the first time, she said, "I think something's wrong with him. I don't think I know who he is anymore." The tapes. Julie's suspicions hardened into certainty when she found the tapes. Hidden in the garage behind a wall of paint cans and holiday decorations, the dusty cardboard box looked like trash. Inside were unlabeled VHS tapes. She popped one into the player, expecting home videos or maybe something embarrassing, but benign. What she saw changed everything. A young man, nervous, smiling, in the pool house. Herb, silent but methodical, was in frame. Then came the choking, the collapse. The camera lingered. Julie screamed, dropped the remote. Her legs gave out and she crawled toward the television to shut it off. She sat in silence for what felt like hours. Her world shattered in an instant. She watched no more. One tape was enough. Julie contacted her lawyer. She turned over the bone photograph, the tapes, and her suspicions to the police. It was no longer a question. Herb Baumeister wasn't just troubled. He was a serial killer. Detective Wilson acted fast. Armed with the tapes and Julie's cooperation, she applied for a warrant. But Herb, already feeling the net tighten, became even more erratic. He started disappearing for entire nights, growing paranoid. He installed new locks, burned papers, and snapped at his children. Julie feared for her safety. She moved the kids to her sister's house and waited. The Farm of Bones. On June 24, 1996, with Herb away on a trip, police arrived at Fox Hollow Farm with a warrant. The search team fanned out across the wooded property, starting behind the pool house. They didn't have to dig far. Bones. Everywhere. scattered along the tree line, embedded in burn pits, some exposed to the air, others buried in shallow graves. Forensic teams set up tents and floodlights. Over the next 2 weeks, they unearthed the remains of at least 11 individuals. The bones were charred, fractured, and mixed with debris. Experts worked around the clock identifying them. Some had personal effects: rings, belt buckles, wallets with faded IDs. Others were too decomposed to name. Most victims matched profiles of men who had vanished from downtown clubs. Fox Hollow became a circus. Reporters camped at the gates. Helicopters hovered overhead. The name Herb Baumeister flooded the news. Julie gave one final interview. "I didn't know, I couldn't have imagined," she said. Her voice broke as she added, "I just wanted to protect my kids." The run. By the time police issued a warrant for Herb's arrest, he was already gone. He'd fled the state, driving north with a .357 Magnum in his trunk. He passed through Illinois, then Michigan, before crossing into Canada. He stayed in motels, rest stops, and parks. He drank heavily. He wrote cryptic notes in a journal. None mentioned the murders. On July 3, 1996, Herb Baumeister's body was found in Pinery Provincial Park in Ontario. He had shot himself in the forehead. A suicide note lay nearby. It blamed financial failure and marital stress. It never acknowledged the bodies buried at Fox Hollow Farm. With Herb dead, justice stalled. But the case didn't close. The aftermath. The media dubbed Fox Hollow Farm the House of Horrors. Families of the missing flocked to the scene. Some wept. Others screamed. Some just stood in silence. Forensic teams identified several victims, including Roger Goodlett, Alan Broussard, and Jeff Jones. Others were harder to name. Some remains had no dental records, no DNA matches, no relatives searching. Rumors emerged that Herb had help, a cleanup partner. A shadowy figure seen once or twice by bar patrons, but no accomplice was ever confirmed. Julie and her children moved away, changed their names. The store closed. The house was sold, then resold. Later, owners claimed it was haunted. Doors slamming, shadows in the pool house, whispers at night. The town of Westfield tried to forget, but the woods still remembered. The legacy of silence. Herb's case sparked outrage across Indiana. LGBTQ+ activists pointed to systemic police apathy. If these had been straight, white college kids, the search would have started after the first one organizer said. Tony Harris testified before the Indiana General Assembly, urging new policies on missing person investigations. His voice trembled as he recounted that night in the pool house. The FBI reopened dozens of cold cases in Ohio and Indiana. Herb was suspected in the I-70 killings, unsolved strangulations of gay men across the region. His victims weren't just numbers. They were sons, lovers, students, artists. Their names were etched into a stone memorial outside Indianapolis. Every year, people gathered to light candles and say the names aloud. To make sure silence never claimed them again. The haunted ground. Fox Hollow Farm sits on 18 acres of woods, still. Trees whisper when the wind blows. The pool house still stands, though the mannequins are long gone. Paranormal investigators have documented cold spots, disembodied voices, and strange sounds. One homeowner claimed to see a man's silhouette walk into the pool house and vanish. Whether haunted by ghosts or guilt, the property bears a heavy energy. People still drive by, stop, stare, and leave in silence. But for those who lived through it, the real horror isn't the hauntings. It's the fact that no one listened until it was too late. beneath the surface. Herb Baumeister never went to trial. He never confessed. He died with secrets still buried, both in the earth and in people's memories. His story stands as a warning. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles, pays taxes, coaches Little League, runs a family business. And sometimes it buries its sins beneath manicured lawns. Today, Fox Hollow Farm is just another property on a real estate listing. But to those who remember, it's a graveyard, a scar, a place where mannequins watched, bones whispered, and a monster named Herb lived among the unsuspecting. And beneath the surface, something still lingers. End. Here are a few key ways Herb Baumeister could have gotten away with his crimes. Some he actively exploited, and others were systemic failures that worked in his favor. 1. Targeting marginalized victims. Herb preyed on young gay men, many of whom were estranged from families, transient, or closeted. These victims were often dismissed by police when reported missing. If he had continued targeting this demographic without making mistakes, he could have remained undetected for longer. 2. Using an alias. By using the name Brian Smart in bars and clubs, he created a layer of separation between his public identity and his predatory behavior. This delayed identification and protected him from immediate suspicion. 3. Maintaining a double life. Outwardly, Herb appeared to be a straight, married father, business owner, and suburban homeowner. His clean-cut image made him seem harmless, allowing him to move in and out of social spaces without raising alarms. 4. Isolating the crime scene. Fox Hollow Farm was large, secluded, and surrounded by woods, perfect for disposing of bodies without neighbors noticing. He didn't need to transport remains far, lowering his risk of exposure through traffic stops or forensic evidence. 5. Burning and burying remains. Herb burned bodies in fire pits and scattered the remains in wooded areas, making identification more difficult. For years, no one realized the bones in the backyard were human. 6th, law enforcement apathy. Multiple police departments failed to collaborate or act on early reports. If Tony Harris hadn't escaped and Julie hadn't come forward with the tapes, Herb likely would have continued undisturbed. 7. Lack of digital surveillance. In the early to mid-1990s, there were no smartphone GPS logs, surveillance cameras in most public places, or widespread forensic DNA databases. Today, his movements would have been easier to track. 8. Psychological manipulation. Herb gaslit his wife for years, explaining away erratic behavior and controlling what she saw or questioned. If she hadn't acted on her suspicions, the investigation might have stalled indefinitely. 9. Fleeing before arrest. Once he sensed the walls closing in, Herb fled across state lines and into Canada. Had he used a fake identity or gone off-grid more effectively, he may have disappeared entirely. Questions for the cult. Answer in the comments. Do you think Herb Baumeister had an accomplice? Why or why not? At what moment should the police have caught him? What detail from the story creeped you out the most? Why do you think Herb kept mannequins in the pool house? If he hadn't died, what do you think his trial would have revealed? This episode of Screw Crime was made possible by listeners like you. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think, consider supporting the work. CashApp, $forrestjob, PayPal, A Divine Destiny, LLC@gmail.com. Subscribe to Screw Crime for future episodes where we go deeper into the darkest corners of human behavior. New drops weekly. Have a killer you want us to cover? Drop their name in the comments and tell us why they should be next. Truth doesn't whisper. It drags bodies into the light. We're just here to narrate it.